Mr. Shashi Tharoor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the Minister for his eloquent introduction of this bill. On the face of it, as he said, the Indian Institutes of Information, the Management Bill is a fairly routine one, and he has presented it in a very unexceptionable light. But I do have some concerns, Madam Chair, that I would like to share with him. First of all, because the legislation brings to the fore certain larger issues involved in our government's approach to the higher education sector. But secondly, of course, there are specifics on the bill that I would also like to address. The larger point is that we have in our country a potential demographic dividend because of our youthful population. But it's very clear that if we don't revitalize our education sector, and in particular higher education, this demographic dividend potentially will transform into a demographic disaster. If we cannot train, educate, equip our young people to take advantage of the opportunities that the world economy and the national economy will offer them in the 21st century, then we will actually end up with a lot of frustrated, unemployed or underemployed young people, and we have seen the consequences of that in our tribal areas with the Maoist movements, the Naxalite movements, and we don't want to see that kind of negative consequence amongst our youth at large in our country. I do fear that this seems not to have been given the importance that it deserves by our government, and I'm not blaming my friend the HRD minister. The problem lies at heart in this government's inability or unwillingness to provide the necessary resources required to be able to drive our higher education sector towards a demographic dividend. If we were to look, for example, at the specific case of the IIMs, they were created many years ago very much as an earnest of the state's determination to equip, train our bright young people to contribute towards their future by equipping them with management qualifications, which were earlier unknown in our country. Management education has been around for 100 years or more in countries like America. In our country, really, they started with the IIMs. And what is striking is that instead of investing in our future through strengthening our education, higher education, what have we seen in the share of budgetary outlay towards education? In the most recent budget, it was stagnant at only 3.7%, and only a meager 1.5% has been allocated to higher education altogether, even though the need has risen year after year, the population is growing year after year, and inflation is also reducing the value of the amounts year after year. The Standing Committee report in March this year, which discussed the demands for grants of the Department of Higher Education, made very strong and pertinent observations and noted that though the government claims to have increased the expenditure for IIMs and IITs, these institutions have been dealing with a chronic shortage of resources and funds that deters them from competing with the global institutions against which we must benchmark institutions like the IIM. Only 3 of our IIMs feature in the list of top 100 management schools in the world as per the 2017 Financial Times ranking. Now, considering the quality of the students that we get in the IIMs, we have very rigorous selection procedures in place in our country, strong competitive examinations. I must say we are failing our young minds if we cannot offer them the access to the best universities in the world in our country. There are young men and women who have to go out and compete with the world. We are in a globalizing economy. Indian companies must also hold their own with multinational corporations and against the best of the world has to offer. Why can't we offer them the best or even better educational facilities than is available in some of these Western countries? I believe that having only 3 out of 100 is a travesty, and I think it reveals that the government is not doing enough to bolster their development. Now, the government is proud to announce that it's created another institution of national importance. I welcome and applaud that, but the expenditure of the government towards higher education is in real terms it's coming down, in nominal terms it's increasing very, very modestly. I think 2% in the last couple of years. Now, when you have an institution of national importance, Madam Chair, it must also be an institution of budgetary importance. But where is the budgetary importance that has been given? I think that my good friend, the HRD Minister, is not getting the support he deserves from the Finance Ministry. And it seems to me that for the government to make, understandably, very ambitious claims about its efforts has to be matched with suitable budgetary allocations. I can see my friend, the Minister for Women and Child Development, has the same problem. This emphasis on fiscal rectitude is all very well, but not at the cost of the nation's objectives and priorities. In fact, if I can just return to the HRD Ministry, having worked there myself for a brief period, if we see how the government's budgetary priorities are functioning, with the Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, I know it's not connected to the IIMs directly, but it reflects a larger problem, that in the name of fiscal probity and controls, you are starving the one thing we have all created, to promote the excellence, the equity and the access to institutions of higher education at the states. And we had hoped to upgrade those poor universities through this Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA, but by March of this year, Madam Chair, only 46% of the total central share of RUSA expenditure has been released and only 24% has been utilized. My worry is this shows either a lack of intent or a lack of monitoring of implementation, or both. And I want to draw the Minister's attention to this. We have a similar problem when it comes to teachers in higher education. The government launched the Pandit Nadan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Training, which is supposed to strengthen the creation and training of teachers in our educational institutions. But what do we see? No progress in the establishment of centers in the universities, and a tiny fraction of the fund has been utilized since 2014. In fact, coming back to the IIMs, let's look at the vacancies. Just recently, this very month, the Minister of State in HRD responded to an honourable MP's question about vacancies in teaching positions, and he stated that 26% of faculty posts in the IIMs and 35% of faculty in the IITs are lying vacant. Now, the race to create more institutions in numbers, which is definitely necessitated by our population growth, must not overshadow the aspects of quality of education. We cannot make up in mindless numbers the glaring lack of quality in higher education in India. But for quality, we need resources, we need money, we need facilities, we need faculty. And this is where, I'm sorry to say, the government is collectively lacking. The government has also delayed the implementation of the Higher Education Financing Agency. How many years have we been hearing about this, Honourable Minister, and we have actually not seen the establishment of this agency? If we really want to have an effective higher education sector for our youth, the government has to be more innovative in its approach. We can have slogans, but those slogans must be fulfilled in reality, and that's not happening. Multi-pronged villages have really held the universities of India back from realizing the aspirations of our young people, and I think only a vision that goes beyond superficial change, that goes beyond slogans to real tangible action will work. But let me come to the specifics of the bill, and I want to agree entirely with the Minister that brand IIM has truly come into its own and is synonymous with a world-class management education with a distinctively Indian flavor. Even only 3 of those IIMs have made it to the top 100. Those 3 are, I think, a revelation of what the rest could be like. After all, the story of our country's economic resurgence would be incomplete without acknowledging the critical role collectively played by the IIMs in providing our country with an amazingly talented, motivated and highly successful pool of managers who have gone on in many ways to transform every area of our society and our economy with their exceptional leadership. So, because they've done that, and because we all have come across very distinguished IIM alumni and the difference they've made to India, I also want to affirm that in my view, they've realized the hopes and vision of the man who established the IIMs, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who had the vision to realize that India needed management education and brought it into this country. As in many other areas of our nation building, we must pay homage to his far-sightedness in realizing that if India is to meet its tryst destiny, India would need world-class leaders for business and industry as well. Now let me turn to the specifics of the bill, because while applauding many good things about it, I do want to acknowledge it's clearly an improvement on the earlier draft that was circulated by the minister's predecessor. That had been assailed by various legitimate controversies, and I congratulate the government on having been able to move past those issues and to come up with a very far-reaching bill. And I want to really congratulate Javadekar Sahab, because there's a significant degree of autonomy conceded for the first time. I think really it's a remarkable moment when a government minister in our system actually surrenders powers and says, please have more autonomy. Many of us have been clamoring for this for some time, and I want to congratulate the Honourable Minister that he has taken this step. But though I support this thrust, I must say that I have some concerns. Now, he has already summarized the bill, Madam Chair. Institution of national importance. One thing that is very striking is the post of visitor is abolished, so that the visitor of these IIMs was the Rashtrapati. Now, it's perhaps a slightly surprising welcome to our new Rashtrapati that he's being stripped of a function as soon as he takes over, but Javadekar Sahab will be answerable for that. It may be an odd welcome, but nonetheless the result of this is that the Board of Governors has a lot more authority. They'll select the chairperson, they will select the director, and neither the Rashtrapati ji nor the Human Resources Development Minister will now have a role in the selection of the top executives of these IIMs. And I think relinquishing government control is an example that I'm very glad he has set through the IIMs. I hope he will follow it in other institutions and create more autonomy for good higher universities and institutions of other earning. And may I request him in the cabinet to encourage his colleagues in other ministries to start doing the same thing. We really need to see some of this being moved aside. And one particular feature I want to congratulate the minister for is he has insisted that the board shall comprise 3 women members, absolutely necessary, and 5 alumni, which is a very good thing. So those who are proud of being educated in these institutions will have an influence in how successive generations are also educated. Excellent idea. And an annual report on the IIMs will be tabled in our parliament. The CAG will audit their accounts. All of this is good, because then we too can ask questions and do some oversight when we see the report. The coordination forum is an interesting initiative. We had contemplated this in our time. I must say you have taken a bold step, that you are not the chair, Mr. Minister, but you have left it to the eminent person, I gather, an eminent person chosen by the board to chair the coordinating committee. And all of these features I want to welcome in the bill. Where do I have some problems? First issue is the bill is completely silent on the issue of, I have just 5 issues, madam. The bill is completely silent on the reservations issue, in teaching staff in particularly. Now, I've already mentioned the 26% vacancy in teaching staff and faculties. Now, on top of that, you don't say anything about reservations for people in the faculty positions. I know that my good friend, the Honourable Minister, has stated that the law of the land will always apply, but I don't find a satisfactory mention of this in the bill. Beg your pardon? Earlier there was a specific provision, today there no longer is. And what is interesting is there is a very vague language saying the IIM shall try to recruit teachers from the weaker sections of society, but I don't understand why, as in the previous provision, it could not be explicitly stated as a requirement in the bill. Now, what is particularly worrying, Minister Sahab, is that of the 233 faculty members in the 6 IIMs that we have information for, only 2 belong to the scheduled caste community and none from the scheduled tribe community. Now, we are living in an era where more and more of our scheduled caste brothers and sisters are speaking of entrepreneurship as the way out of their lot in life. Dalit entrepreneurship is a major theme in recent years, and I think it is a worrying neglect of the legitimate aspirations for business leadership and business development on the part of our scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities that we have only 2 amongst all of them out of 233 faculty. I would urge the Minister to give this attention. Second issue that the House must contemplate is a consequence of a good decision. The decision to give all 20 IIMs in the country the right to award degrees is welcome, and I support it. Madam, I need 3 minutes, just 3 more points. Prior to this, IIMs, like other universities, used to offer something called a postgraduate diploma in management, which obviously was not universally accepted as an MBA, particularly in many foreign countries. If IIMs give MBA degrees, which now they're going to be allowed to, that will be very good. But it will now create a difference between the IIMs and all the other private and semi-private institutions of management which are still stuck with giving PG DMs. And Minister Saab has got to be aware that creating a new differential is not going to help the challenge of educating the large number of young people in our country who need management degrees, and it will be an unnecessary disadvantage placed upon these other institutions. And therefore I propose that the government in its next step should have a more ambitious management education bill so that other management institutions can benefit from these reforms, create a national management university to which they could all be affiliated and which can issue MBAs as well. So it's not only the IIMs giving MBAs as a result of today's bill, but other management institutions can also do so. Singapore did something very similar with the Singapore Management University. It has been a huge success, improved management education in the country, but it's also gone very far in terms of global recognition. Third issue, ma'am. The complete control over the board that has been granted by this bill over the fee structure worries me a little bit. I completely advocate autonomy of the university in other matters, IIMs and so on, but a lack of control of the government over the quantum of fees may lead to disadvantages for the marginalized sections in our society. The needs of the nation could not be properly met if students from poorer families would have to undertake the burden of very heavy loans just to be able to study in a government institution, which is what the IIM is. They would then feel obliged to look for lucrative jobs in the business sector. They would not necessarily try and work back to their communities. The chances of such an IIM graduate burdened with loans pursuing academics or research or even teaching in future IIMs would not be there. And therefore, I think it would defeat the purpose of the bill if there wasn't some way in which we could guide some control. Last 2 points, madam. Fourth concern is lack of full-time directors in the IIMs. November 2016, the Minister has told us that 13 of the 20 IIMs are functioning without full-time directors. The government has failed to fill up these vacancies consistently, and this is creating a vacuum of leadership in the IIMs. And then there are 2 small provisions which I want to mention. One is you're changing the name of IIM Calcutta to IIM Kolkata in this bill. I'm a little worried about the erosion of the brand value of IIMC as a term. But equally, I come from Kerala, and we already have an IIMK in IIM Kozhikode. How can you have 2 IIMKs? You will actually undermine the identity of both. I think this requires a rethink, and you might want to leave IIM Calcutta as Calcutta, or call it IIM Kolkata, but let it be known as IIMC, because that is a very distinctive brand. And finally, a rather petty thing has been done, Madam Chairman, in this bill. With great regret, I want to mention that the government has decided to drop the prefix Rajiv Gandhi from the name of IIM Shillong. Now, this is symptomatic of a pattern of attempting to demolish traditions and erase history. Of course, Rajiv Gandhi's contribution to this country is something that does not need one name here or there to justify it. He has done a great deal to take India into the 20th century. But I must say it is rather petty of the government to stoop so low in such a manner. To conclude, madam, management education is extremely important in our country. These institutions have actually done a great deal for India. They have driven our nation forward. Many of the IIM products must hold key positions in our economy, in our society, and therefore I hope that the government will actually see this bill as an opportunity to bolster the potential of its institutes, address these flaws, and give India the management leaders it deserves. Thank you, Madam. Jai Hind.